want everybody to know how much I love that boy and how much I cared about him.
Today's case starts in La Plata County with a phone call to the local police department by Elaine Redwine.
Hi, my name is Elaine Redwine, and my son Dylan Redwine was visiting his dad up in Durango, and his dad texted me a little while ago and said he could not find Dylan.
Okay.
He's 13 years old.
Okay, so he's staying with his dad. And what's the dad's name?
Mark
Redwine. Does he have any idea where he may have gone?
Not according to him, no.
Elaine states that her son Dylan had been visiting his father, and she received a text from Dylan's father, Mark, asking if she's heard from Dylan because he's been trying to reach him all day. Dylan at this time is 13 years old. He has only been at his father's house for less than 24 hours, and now he's missing. Text would show that Elaine had some suspicion of Mark, and Elaine would jump in her car and drive 6 hours to Durango, Colorado, to start to look for her son. The forecast for the night Dylan would go missing was supposed to be below freezing, so the search was on to find Dylan. Durango was some of the harshest terrain in the U.S. Search coordinator Roy Freeland would stay out till 12:30 to 1 in the morning. Ray would say in an interview that the thing that seemed odd was that Mark never came out to help look for his son, and he would turn off all the lights in the house as if he was going to sleep. The search would bring out hundreds of people to help look for Dylan Redwine. Mark would point to a search area around a mountain lake dam that was about 7 miles away. Mark's logic was that Dylan was a big fan of fishing, and he couldn't find Dylan's fishing pole.
Walking along the edges of this road, trying to find possibly Dylan's backpack. Dylan's mom is in front of me, and she's doing pretty good. She's holding it together pretty good. Ryan, you were the last person to talk to Dylan on Sunday night, right?
Yes.
And so tell me what was going on. You guys were just texting and...
He sounded really excited to come over. He was actually supposed to stay the night, but decided not to for some reason, I don't know why. And then we decided that he would just come over at 6:30 in the morning. That's just what he asked. And I said that was fine. And so I set an alarm, and I woke up in time, and he never showed up.
Mark would speak about Dylan at a gathering in a past tense.
I want everybody to know how much I love that boy and how much I cared about him. He was such a wonderful boy. He meant everything. And unfortunately, his mom and I don't see eye to eye on things. And I wish that could change.
Elaine would ask Mark if Dylan and him got into a fight, and Mark would say no, and Elaine would say that Dylan wouldn't just leave without texting her or his brother Corey. The police and the FBI would start to interview Mark.
Obviously, it's no secret that I believe that Elaine could be involved in this. You know, I don't know how she would do it. I don't know who else she would have involved with it, but I can't help but think that there's a possibility that she had some involvement in this.
Mark would blame Elaine at the end of the interview for the disappearance of Dylan. Dylan would fly into Durango to spend Thanksgiving holiday with Mark for a court-appointed visit. Dylan would make it known that he didn't want to go because his grandmother was sick with cancer, and that this would most likely be the last Thanksgiving with her. Unfortunately, there was nothing that Elaine and Dylan could do due to it being a court-ordered visit. In the airport CCTV footage, it would appear that Dylan was not happy to see his father. Dylan and Mark would stop at a local Walmart on the way back to Mark's to buy some DVDs, and in the Walmart footage, Dylan and Mark are not shopping together. Text would show that Dylan did not want to be there with his father. The last time Dylan is seen alive is in that Walmart, and his phone stopped sending a signal at 9:46 p.m. In January of 2013, a group of protesters was set up outside of Mark Redwine's home. Elaine and Corey would join them. The FBI would carry out a search warrant on Mark Redwine's home. While this was taking place, Mark would have bloodshot eyes, but he had clearly not been crying, and would put on an act of emotional duress. As the search was underway, the cadaver dogs would be brought in and would alert in one area in the home and in the bed of Mark's truck. Mark would take a lie detector test along with Elaine. She would pass and Mark would fail. The question that Mark would fail on was, do you know where Dylan is?
You've taken it once, Elaine took it once, she passed it, and you failed it. If you lead us to him, I absolutely guarantee you that I would not arrest you today. If you told me where Dylan is today, and you take me to Dylan, show me where he's at, we'll drop you back off at your car at your house, and we get Dylan back. And you go on with your life. Because what's more important is we want him back home.
I want that.
If you show us today, show where he's at today, just bring us there. I guarantee you, I'll cut you loose. I'm not going to arrest you today.
But Tom, I can't help you with that because I don't know where Dylan's at.
And I think you do. I know you do. If he fell down accidentally and hurt himself and you freaked out and panicked and you put him somewhere, you know, it's better to get in front of this than to have somebody down the road find him and then, oh, what do we do now? You know, he's in a shallow grave. This doesn't look good. Last seen by Dad. Or you can just tell us where he's at and work with us, and we'll deal with all the other stuff later.
I'm not going to sit here and admit to you that I've done something that didn't happen, that I didn't do. And if that's what you're waiting on, then we're going to be waiting a long time for that.
I got all the time in the world. When's enough? Enough? When's it going to be too much for you to hide?
While on a trip with Mark and Corey in Cleveland to see a baseball game, Dylan would be on Mark's computer late at night while Mark was sleeping. Dylan would find pictures that had been deleted of his father in women's clothes. Shocked, Dylan would call out to Corey to come and look. The pictures would be of Mark wearing a red dress with pantyhoses, and some videos of Mark wearing a diaper where he would shit in it and clean it up with his mouth. Corey would pull his phone out and take a few photos and would tell Dylan, do not say anything about this to Mark. Dylan was the kind of kid that would say what he was feeling and what was on his mind. And one day Mark and Dylan would get into an argument about Elaine and Corey not being good examples for him. And Dylan would text Corey asking for the pictures of his father doing these sick acts. Corey instead would send the pictures to Mark, a decision that Corey regrets to this day. The FBI would think that this was one of the leading causes of Dylan's disappearance. Elaine, Corey, and Mark would appear on the Dr. Phil show.
This is going to be a changing day in your life.
I hate you, and you have been nothing of a father.
I want you to do something to find Dylan.
Dylan is everything to me. My whole world revolves around Dylan.
Are the photos genuine?
No, they are not.
So that's not you in the photos?
Well, I'm not arguing that it's my face in the photos. What I'm arguing is the fact that they were fabricated, because it was actually, I believe that Elaine and Corey were coming into my house and rummaging through my things and going through my personal belongings when I traveled out of town. I came up with a scheme that had to be so outrageous that they could not talk about it. And that's exactly what I got out of that. Did I ever intend to be sitting here on your show having this conversation with you or them? Absolutely not.
With the family going on Dr. Phil, hundreds of tips would pour in, but none of them would pan out. The police just didn't have enough to charge Mark with the death of Dylan, because winter had hit and there was no body. The searchers wanted to search Middle Mountain, and the mountain is closed for the winter, But as spring approached, Mark would be spotted coming down the mountain road, so the search would be kicked into high gear. They would bring out 35 dogs, ATVs, horseback searchers, and climbers, and they would search for 4 days. And one of those days, a Nike Air Force One size 7 youth would be found. The next day, the dogs would focus on the area where the Nike was found, and they would alert on 2 bones that turned out to be Dylan's. A phone call was made to Mark.
This is investigator Tanya Galbright. This is a phone call to Mark Redwine.
This is Mark.
Hey Mark, it's Tanya.
Hi, how are you?
I'm wonderful, how are you?
Oh, I'm living the dream.
Are you intoxicated, Mark?
Nope, not at all.
Okay, then why are you talking to me like that?
Because I'll be honest with you, Tanya, I don't think you're capable of handling a situation.
Really? Don't you think it's pretty amazing we found any remains up on Middle Mountain? In the middle of nowhere?
You know, 2% of Dylan's remains does not constitute him being found, so you know what?
Yes, it does. He's dead. We know that now. If we hadn't gone up there and looked, we wouldn't have known that.
So 2% of Dylan's remains constitutes him being found.
I'd like to find the rest of him, but yes, we know what happened. We know he's no longer with us.
Mark would state to his half-brother that only 2% of Dylan's remains were found, and this means they cannot prove that he was murdered. Mark would call and say he had been moving his ATV, and he happened to find Dylan's fishing pole, and this was impossible due to the area being searched by the FBI and police. It would appear that Mark used his son's love of fishing to divert the search from Middle Mountain to a lake. 3 years would pass, and it is 2015. A hiker would find Dylan's skull about 1 mile away from the other bones. With the bones being found, Elaine thought for sure Mark was going to go to jail. But it would take until 2017 when a new district attorney was elected, the same assistant district attorney that had been helping with the case. In 2017, a grand jury would return an indictment of Mark Redwine for second-degree murder and child abuse.
A warrant for murder second for you. I'm sorry?
I have no idea what that's about.
Mark would be in Washington State working as a truck driver when he was arrested. Mark would go to trial for second-degree murder, not for first-degree. In Colorado, first-degree would need to have proof that the murder was planned. 9 years would pass since Dylan had gone missing.
Spend a couple minutes telling the jury about it, okay?
Dylan was sweet. He was funny. He was charismatic. He was very empathetic. He really cared about people and their feelings. Very sweet boy.
Okay, Ms. Hall. There's tissues to the left if you need them. You have water with you. See Mark Redwine in the courtroom here today.
Yes. He's wearing a blue shirt and gray suit.
Ms. Hall, I'm showing you what's been previously admitted into evidence of peoples 1, 2, and 3. Can you take a look at those, please?
I've seen those a million times.
What are those?
They're pictures of Dylan, his friends Adam and Joe.
See any injuries, sores, or cuts to his face or lips?
No. How's it going, son? You okay?
All right. Ms. Hall, I know this is, I can only imagine how hard this is. I'm really sorry.
Thank you.
The final text message in this exhibit, what do you say in that text message, Ms. Hall?
I said, Dylan, please be safe. Mom is here to come get you, son.
Elaine would be shown photos of Dylan with his friends the day before he left to see his father. Then the last thing she would be shown was the unanswered text that she sent to Dylan. Elaine was the first person to point the finger at Mark. Of course, the defense team would use that to defend Mark, Needless to say, attacking a mother of a dead child was a poor defense. The prosecutor would show pictures of Mark that Dylan had found to show possible motive for the death of Dylan. With Dylan not being able to take the stand, Corey would be called to the stand to recount the moment Dylan had found the photos of Mark. On the fourth day of the trial, the prosecutor would set up Mark Redwine's living room in an empty courtroom down the hall to show what they believed happened to Dylan that night. Some of the evidence they had was traces of Dylan's blood on the couch, but with Dylan being a frequent visitor to Mark's, the prosecutor's witness could not say when the blood was left. The last days of the trial would focus on Dylan's skull, with witnesses stating the marks on Dylan's skull was due to blunt force trauma. The defense team would focus on the fact that Dylan's skull was found in an area where bears were known to be. The prosecutor would bring animal experts in, and they would say that bears and mountain lions could move body parts far, but it was unheard of for them to move them more than a quarter of a mile. And Dylan's remains were found 1 mile apart. With all the talk about what happened to Dylan, the jury would look to Mark to have a reaction, but there was none. Mark would choose not to take the stand. The closing arguments of the prosecutor.
At its core, this is a simple and tragic case. A damaged and deteriorating relationship that turned deadly on November 18th, 2012. We know Dylan knows about the poop pics, as he calls them. I could show them to you, but you remember them, ladies and gentlemen. Think about the impact they had on his 13-year-old son. You think it would have taken much for Dylan to use them in November, to bring them up, to talk about them? We know that Dylan's murder was not caused by an accident. We know Dylan's murder was not caused by a bear because of all the evidence that comes before and everything that he did after. And all it took was a spark for this man to end Dylan's life.
When you're ready, Mr. Bogan.
May it please the court. We stand shoulder to shoulder, Mr. Mark Redwine, because it's our honor to stand with someone who's wrongly accused. And the evidence is so thin, and the emotions are so high. So we have government cases based on the pictures. They introduce the pictures as evidence. They want you to believe that these pictures will provide some enlightenment to you about the motive that they ascribe to Mr. Redwine for killing his youngest son, whom he loved. Do not fall for that.
The trial would last 5 weeks, but the jury would only take 6 hours.
Jury verdict count number 1, murder in the second degree. We, the jury, find the defendant, Mark Redwine, guilty of count number 1. Be quiet, please. Count number 2, child abuse. We, the jury, find the defendant, Mark Redwine, guilty of count 2, child abuse.
Colorado does not have a death penalty, so Mark was sentenced to 48 years in prison. Elaine and Corey gave statements.
I'm really nervous, so
it's okay.
Bear with me. Dylan was 13 years old when you took his life. When I think about what happened that night, it breaks my heart to think about Dylan looking up at his dad knowing he's the killer. He is my killer. It breaks my heart. And I wonder, what were you thinking then when you saw his big old blue eyes? I mean, I don't even think that it fazed you. I'm just glad that we are free from you and that you will not be free to hurt us anymore. Thank you, Your Honor.
Mark may have physically taken him, and I can't change that. But what I can do is tell the world how a 13-year-old young man stood up to his then 50-year-old father and said all the things I regret never saying. Dylan is my hero and became more of a man in 13 years than Mark has in 60.
Mark did not want to give any closing statements, but the judge would read a statement that Mark would give to the probation officer.
Do you wish to tell me anything before sentencing?
No, Your Honor, I do not.
You wrote the following. and this is a quote from what you wrote. Innocent of all charges, miscarriage of justice, fake conviction, sham trial. I have trouble remembering a convicted criminal defendant that has shown such an utter lack of remorse for his criminal behavior. The community needs to be protected from you. You need to be removed from society for a long period of time. I'm going to sentence you to 48 years on both counts with 5 years of parole. They are to be served concurrently. Deputy Robinson, take the defendant back to jail.
As a father, I could not imagine what it feels like to lose one of my children, let alone from my own hands. As a father, we are here to lead our children to do the right things and to help those who cannot help themselves. But Mark Redwine was a man of selfishness, whose sick, perverted ways and cowardiceness of others finding out what he liked to do in his free time led to him killing his own son. Let me know what you think down in the comments.